Story 1. The creatures that appeared to take the dead villains to hell, I suppose, in Ghost. Story 2. The creepy baby head spider toy in Sid's room from the original Toy Story scared me a lot. Story 3. Willy Wonka boat trip. Traumatic as a child and disturbing to me now. What is that scene about anyway? Story 4. Probably American History X. A scene where the main character curb stomps a black man's head into the sidewalk. Story 5. Requiem for a Dream. That whole movie will deeply affect you. It taught me to never take drugs after watching it for the first time at age 10. Story 6. Schindler's List shows when they line up Jewish people and shoot them. The bullet kills most of the people in the row, but the last two survive. However, they still walk up and shoot them anyway. It is one of my favorite movies, but it is definitely a sobering watch. Story 7. Almost every scene in Watership Down. My mother let my sister and me watch it, thinking it was a children's film. How wrong she was. Story 8. Bilbo trying to snatch the ring from Frodo in Rivendell in the Fellowship of the Ring. The face he made terrified me as a child. Story 9. The Am I Funny? Scene in Goodfellas. I have watched it many times since, but when I first saw it, I think it was the first time I had seen that sudden switch in a movie. Story 10. When the assistant dies in Jurassic World, I found her painful death extremely distasteful, and it ruined the entire mediocre movie for me. Story 11. The pie machine scene in Chicken Run. I was always fine, even as a kid, with horror and ghosts, but I would have panic attacks over Mrs. Tweedy coming to turn me into a pie. Story 12. The scene of Bambi's mother dying. I was about 6 years old and did not understand why something so sad was in a kid's category. From then on, I have been suspicious of anything that seems cute. Story 13. The Jabberwocky from the 1980s television series Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Honestly, so many of those characters were terrifying to a little girl. Story 14. The part where she rips the skin off her finger in Black Swan made me not want to even touch my hangnails for a long time. Story 15. The Electric Company. A man was sitting on a chair in a room where he was standing up. I thought he was trapped. Those scenes haunted me for decades. Story 16. To start, I will mention the movie Star Wars. Return of the Jedi, where Luke Skywalker is sentenced to be thrown into the pit with the huge monster under Jabba the Hutt's palace. I could not sleep for days when I was younger. Story 17. Definitely Mufasa's death, when Simba goes up to him and lifts his paw. I also had tears pouring down while watching Frozen 2 in the cinema when Olaf died. My dad had died not long before, and the grief hit me like a waterfall. I was glad of the dark. Story 18. Still don't know what movie it was. Assumed mob style or genre movie. The kids are asleep, and this hitman put a pillow over each of the two kids, one at a time, and killed them as they slept. He may have killed the parents too. I was thoroughly traumatized at 8 years old. Story 19. The skinning scene near the beginning of Dread is chilling. The man did it so casually to these helpless, fully conscious men with no mercy. The casual nature of the scene and the man's indifferent attitude magnified the horror for me. Story 20. Superman 3 features the bossy woman being pulled into the computer and turned into a cyborg. It is a silly movie, but as a child, that scene disturbed me. Story 21. Not a movie, but The Walking Dead with the character and the barbed wire covered bat. It still pops into my head occasionally. I stopped watching the show at that point. Story 22. The part where they find the body in Stand By Me used to scare me so much. Also, the scene in The Little Mermaid where Ursula becomes gigantic at the end. Story 23. The scene in The Hunchback of Notre Dame where they tie Quasimodo to the wheel and spin him around while people throw food at him. He is screaming for help the whole time, and Frollo not only does not help but also orders Phoebus not to interfere. It was really horrifying to me as a child. Story 24. The Velociraptor in the plane scene from Jurassic Park 3, followed by the landing and takeoff scenes. I saw it when I was very young and was afraid of dinosaurs for years afterward. Story 25. When the train hopper man eats the beans in Dennis the Menace. So creepy. I was scared of trains for a long time. Story 26. Not a horror movie per se, but in Piranha 3D, after one of the attacks at the beach, two men are carrying a girl out of the water by her arms and feet. Suddenly, she screams and splits in half as the piranhas have eaten her waist. Story 27. I have three examples. When the bad guys in Follow That Bird turned Big Bird blue, put him in a cage and made him sing. When Dumbo was separated from his mother. When Bambi lost his mother. Story 28. The Green Mile. I begged my parents to stay up and watch it too and cried for hours afterward. Mostly the ending, but the part with the dry sponge was also pretty traumatic. Sorry, Mom and Dad, you were right. I wasn't ready for that one. Story 29. Bambi's mother being shot by the hunter. I am 64 years old and still traumatized by that. Story 30. Violet Beauregard turning into a blueberry in The Old Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Augustus Gloop was a really bad start. I guess I was already very freaked out at that point, so the blueberry transformation just sent me over the edge. I remember running out of the room in a panic. Story 31. I have mentioned this before in another group, but the chasm scene in Peter Jackson's King Kong with all the giant insects is remarkable. Story 32. Peter Jackson's King Kong when they fall off the log and the crickets, worms, and centipedes come after them. Story 33. For the longest time, I considered Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory to be horror. That Augustus scene traumatized me as a child. Story 34. Your Friends and Neighbors, 1998. Jason Patric's character is talking about the best sex he ever had and tells a story about how he and some friends sexually assaulted a kid they bullied in high school after he reported them for bullying. That was frightening. I turned the movie off and never saw the ending. I did not want to continue watching. Story 35. The pie-eating contest in Stand By Me had a lot of vomiting, and watching him chug raw eggs with oil gave me nightmares for weeks. Story 36. I do not know the movie, but it showed a herd of sheep jumping off a cliff together. At another point, the dog went missing, and it showed the dog dead with someone eating the dog's leg like a chicken leg. Raw. I have not seen it since and cannot remember the purpose. I kind of want to watch the movie as an adult to see if I remember it correctly. Story 37. The scene in Beauty and the Beast. Enchanted Christmas when the evil Tim Curry organ starts playing itself so loudly it ends up destroying itself and the castle. Honestly, everything about that character scared me as a kid, even as a child who grew up watching Alien and playing Resident Evil. Story 38. This Boy's Life, where they finally settle the issue because of the mustard jar. I make sure every condiment jar is completely empty before throwing it out now. Story 39. Doctor Who is perhaps not a movie. I saw the scene where the kids in gas masks walk around in the fog, asking, "Are you my mommy?" That was horrible. The next time I watched, there was a monster that lived in the house, but you did not see it. There was a door they never saw, and the monster was there. They forgot an entire room in the house. No more Doctor Who for me after that. Story 40. Sleeping Beauty, the Disney cartoon, right before she pricks her finger on the spindle. I think Maleficent casts a spell on her to draw her to the spindle. The colors change to greenish tones, creepy music starts, and then she pricks her finger. She and everyone else fall asleep. That whole sequence scared me a lot as a kid. Another scene is the air conditioner scene in The Brave Little Toaster. It scared me so much that I never watched the movie all the way through again. Story 41. Are we going to talk about the elephant in the room? Hello. The flying monkeys in The Wizard of Oz. The ultimate child's nightmare. Story 42. Emil, the toxic waste guy's death in RoboCop messed me up when I was 10 years old back in the late 1980s. I still love the film though. Story 43. The goat leg falling on the windshield in Jurassic Park. I was maybe around 7 years old when I first watched it. Story 44. Art tax. Interestingly enough, me at 2, don't care. Me at 35 watching a kid's movie thinking it will be nice and easy. Crying into my oversized pillow. Story 45. RoboCop, where Murphy is sprayed limb from limb by Clarence's mob. As a 5-year-old, I could not get the image of that death out of my head. Story 46. The dog dying in John Wick. I have to keep reminding myself it is just a movie. That puppy deserved an Oscar. Story 47. Sophie's Choice. When she was forced to make a difficult decision. I was an adult when I saw it and had to watch the movie several times before I could get through that scene. A friend went to the theater when it first came out, and she, along with several others, had to leave during that scene. My friend has never been able to watch it again. Story 48. That scene from Aladdin where the Cave of Wonders wakes up looking like a tiger upset about his sleep. That scene really disturbed me as a child. Story 49. Not a movie, a game series. Assassin's Creed. My first Assassin's Creed game was Unity, where you play as Arno. It opens with Kid Arno playing with another kid and introducing himself. Hi, I'm Arno. Right after this, there is a commotion revealing that Arno's dad has been assassinated. I played the game for dozens of hours but never found out who murdered his dad. Whatever. I love the game and the character. Eventually, I wanted to play a different game. I found another Assassin's Creed game, Rogue. I bought it and then discovered it is set before Unity. In this game, you play as an assassin but end up having problems with the Brotherhood. Switch. Now a Templar, you try to thwart the assassins by assassinating them. Like Bruce Willis' Old Habits Die Hard. I ended up having some fun on a ship acting like a pirate. Finally, the final mission starts. The goal is to assassinate a Brotherhood member. The target is in a fancy building. Walking down the halls, things look familiar but I can't place it. As I continue walking, I pass two kids. It's weird for kids to be in a fancy building, but I ignore them until I hear it. Hi, I'm Arno. Everything starts clicking together like the worst puzzle imaginable. I can't be that guy, right? Please, no. Should I exit? Do I quit the game? I can't. I have to know. Out of pure morbid curiosity, I go into the crowd and do the deed. There is a commotion because of the body, and I see it. I was the enemy all along. I did this to poor Arno. What have I become? Took me nearly 2 weeks to process this. Summary. Don't play Assassin's Creed. Unity before playing Assassin's Creed. Rogue. Story 50. In Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner in 1990, his wolf friend Two Socks is shot and killed. I was 6 years old. It was devastating. Story 51. One that I have not seen posted yet but affected me deeply as a teenager is the scene in The Green Mile where the careless person does not wet the head sponge before they electrocute the man from Evening Shade. Story 52. I've unfortunately got two examples. One is where Marley becomes ill and passes away in Marley and Me. The other is from a movie whose name I have forgotten. A man leaves his German Shepherd behind at an airport and dashes for the plane after throwing a ball for the dog. The shepherd loyally waits for his owner's return, and you see the days roll by as he waits. That scene really affected me for a while. Story 53. Not sure if they were movies or if I dreamed them, but one was about a kid who could tell the weather accurately by being psychic and saw the sun exploding, which was bad. The other was some type of action movie where a dad and kids get gassed in a car wash and scream to get out. I have never been able to find them, and no one seems to remember them, but I still get creeped out in car washes. I see them vividly. Story 54. Titanic, when the ship sank. I was about 7 or 8 years old and had nightmares afterward. Since then, I have been on larger ships only a few times, but I still do not feel very comfortable. Story 55. When zwelg is sent away in als je begrijpt wat ik bedoel. I guess that is not much of an answer since it is a Dutch cartoon movie. Story 56. I recently watched Only the Brave. I knew nothing about the story. I expected it to be a feel-good movie about some firefighters rescuing people or cheating death. The scene where you realize, no, they are all dead, hit me hard. Story 57. I honestly do not even know what kind of movie this was, but I came across it on a VHS tape as a child. The only thing I remember is a woman lying on her back, arms out to the side and strapped down, while two other women were slicing her arms open. I immediately turned it off, but I cannot tell you how many times I have thought about it over all these years. I am too afraid to search for something so disturbing. Story 58. The final scene of Silent Running shows the robot watering the plants and drifting off into eternity. As a young child, this affected me deeply for years and is still the only film to make me cry. Story 59, Hunchback of Notre Dame, where the crowd turns on Quasimodo at the festival. They suddenly realize that tormenting him is more entertaining than celebrating him. I did not finish it until I was an adult, which is definitely a good thing. Story 60. I saw The Wizard of Oz when I was very little and had nightmares about the Wicked Witch and her flying monkeys, especially the monkeys. I also saw an adventure movie, but I can't remember the title. There was a scene of someone sinking in quicksand. Even though they were rescued, I became terrified of quicksand. I had a recurring nightmare of dead-eyed creatures made of mud and jungle vines lumbering slowly toward me while I was too petrified to run away. They would drag me into a pit of quicksand in the middle of a dark swamp. I screamed for help, but my family watched and did nothing while I sank. I woke up crying from this dream multiple times during my childhood. Story 61. Werewolf transformation in Harry Potter. I was around 8 when I went to see it in the cinema. It took me until my 20s before I could watch it all the way through without looking away. It gave me nightmares for years. Story 62. Non-horror movies based on discrimination. The first one that comes to mind is Glory Road. There is a bathroom scene where white customers dunk a black player into a toilet. Story 63. The scene in Titanic where Rose has to find Jack after he is arrested, and the stairs are already submerged, so she has to get in the water. Story 64. The Joker roasting that guy in Batman 1989. I was 6 when I saw that part and I walked away from it. I did not watch the full movie until I was in college. Story 65. The first scene in Ghostbusters, I cannot remember if it is 1 or 2, where the old lady ghost in the library goes, "Shoo." That used to scare me a lot. I must have only been about 5 years old. Story 66. When I was a child, I used to have nightmares about Morgan Freeman playing the vampire on The Electric Company. Story 67. This one might be a bit obscure, but there is a service called Bookflix, which featured little animated shorts of various children's books. One day in 3rd grade, I was sitting there, snacking on some goldfish crackers, watching the adaptation of Hansel and Gretel. Then the scene where the witch gets shoved into the oven played, and those screams haunted 8-year-old me. Story 68. Looper. The opening scene shows a man being tortured in the past, and in the present or future, you begin to see his fingers and nose disappear. Story 69. Start of Star Trek II. The Wrath of Khan. The scene with Khan and the larva. I saw The Wrath of Khan when it was new in theaters. I was 10 years old and no. Story 70. An episode of Teletubbies with a creepy lion and bear. They are still creepy when I rewatched it to see if I was being dramatic as a child. Story 71. Is The Fly a horror movie? I saw it when I was very young. There is a scene where he is arm wrestling and the other man's arm breaks in half. That scene disturbed me a lot. Story 72. Cliffhanger. The whole movie. I'm afraid of heights. When that scene came out, it was much worse. I had a death grip on my chair in the theater. Story 73. City of God. When the man shoots the little boy and then shoots the other boy in the foot, forcing him to walk straight by threatening to shoot him again if he does not. Story 74. There is a Western movie from the 1970s, and I do not know what it is called honestly, but it features a villain cowboy killing a woman by shoving her own pearl necklace into her mouth until she choked and died. 5-year-old me was not okay with that imagery, obviously. Story 75. I feel like this is the obvious answer for my generation, but I will say it anyway. Artax and Atreyu. Oh, and Bambi and his mother. That one too. Story 76. Bridge to Terabithia, the last scene where he sees his friend before she died. Mortality never seemed so real. Story 77. The scene in Sophie's Choice, you know the one. I didn't even have children yet, and I could feel my heart breaking for her. Story 78. Not even a movie, but that one episode of the 2012 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where they body horror Raphael, my favorite. I think the episode was called Rise of the Squirrel Noids or something. It was like a parody of Aliens, and I did not like it. Story 79. The wax museum scene in the original Shaggy Dog movie. Wax museums are usually spooky to me, but that one seemed especially creepy. Story 80. The beginning of the Disney Channel original movie You Lucky Dog, where the old man dies in the rain, made me experience grief for the first time. Story 81. Cliffhanger when Sylvester Stallone drops that poor woman. I have a fear of falling from heights, and my heart was pounding when he was trying to hold her. I was sure he would save her until his hand started slipping from the glove. I had to look away. That actress performed that scene exceptionally well. Where the red fern grows when old Dan grieves himself to death over his sister's passing. That movie made Old Yeller look like a slapstick comedy in comparison. Story 82. The Russian roulette scene in The Deer Hunter. I had seen many war movies for my age in middle school, many more realistic than The Deer Hunter, and that scene gave me nightmares. Story 83. Either the flying monkeys from The Wizard of Oz or when Snow White was running through the forest. Both scare me to this day. I had nightmares for weeks. Oddly, both films are from the same time frame. Both movies are from the late 1930s, and I was roughly 4 or 5 when I first saw them. I still love the movies and watch them frequently. Story 84. There was an episode of a procedural crime drama, I think Criminal Minds, where a murderer tortures and kills a young woman on camera while the song Only the Good Die Young plays and sends a video of it to her family. I cannot remember any other details about the episode, but I still cannot listen to that song. Story 85. In Once Upon a Forest, the entire hollow is wiped out by poison gas. The baby badger runs to her dead parents and almost dies herself. Story 86. I tried to watch the Highlander movie with Chris Pine. I don't remember the exact title. There was a scene where a person was strung up and disemboweled. It literally gave me nightmares for a night or two. I don't have the stomach for stuff like that. Story 87. Not going to state the scene to avoid spoilers, but the film Looking for Mr. Goodbar was so influential that I never had a one-night stand. Not a single one. Seriously, they should show that film in sex education. Story 88. The rabbits being buried alive in Watership Down, that is not a kid's movie. The whole movie is so heartbreaking. Story 89. Saving Private Ryan. The scene where the mother sees the military vehicles coming up the road to her rural home. It hurts so much every time I watch it. Saddest movie moment for me. Story 90. The original Watership Down. Fiverr's visions frightened me as a child. Also, that ghostly black rabbit made me feel uneasy. The entire movie was traumatic. Story 91. I was watching a documentary called Before We Ruled the Earth. There was a scene with a giant cave sloth, and I was terrified to go near any dark enclosed spaces for a while. I rewatched it years later as an adult, and the sloth was completely harmless. Story 92. The radio flyer, bird, and hammer scene in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind reminded me of another television movie, A Girl Named Sooner, and possibly a personal experience. Story 93. Reservoir Dogs. Stuck in the middle with you, cutting off the cop's ear, just so psychotic and realistic. It's a fantastic movie, but I always have to plug my ears and shut my eyes. It's just too real. Side note. I always love that song but can't help thinking of that scene. It gives me chills. Story 94. Donovan's death in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I watched that movie when I was maybe 6 or 7, and not even the rats bothered me as much as that scene did. It still makes me squirm to this day. Story 95. The scene in the Muppet movie when Professor Krassman, played by Mel Brooks, puts Kermit in an electric chair to get his frog legs. Electronic cerebrectomy. It turns the brains into guacamole. I have always been creeped out by shock treatments and electric chairs in movies like Return to Oz, The Green Mile, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I think this is why. Story 96. The terrifying teddy bear nightmare scene in Look Who's Talking 2. I remember it playing on television, and I ran from the room. Story 97. Lily Tomlin in The Garbage Disposal in The Incredible Shrinking Woman terrified me as a young child. Story 98. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. There are quite a few notable scenes, from the characters falling from the airship to the final scene where one of the villains ages rapidly and dies. Story 99. I have not seen the movie, and because of other people's comments, I never will. The picture used in the advertisement about the movie shows two young boys sitting on opposite sides of a fence around World War II. One is dressed in regular clothes, and one in death camp stripes. It is my understanding that the little boy in the death camp dies. Traumatized by proxy. Story 100. The woman who had sex with her lover, with whom she gave birth in the movie The Womb. It sounds strange even when I say it. Story 101. Where the red fern grows, why the teachers thought it was appropriate for elementary students to watch, especially after we were traumatized by reading it in class. Story 102. The entire underwater submarine scene in the new Mission Impossible movie made me repeatedly think the F word. I have an irrational fear of deep open water, known as thalassophobia, especially when there are very large objects in it. Story 103. American History X, the curb stomp scene, left a lasting impression on me. It was deeply disturbing and traumatic. Even though it has been over 20 years since I saw it, the memory still haunts me. It was one of the most brutal and unsettling scenes I have ever seen on screen. Story 104. Maybe not traumatized, but the final scene in A Nightmare on Elm Street scared me a lot. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.